The biggest thing that dogs the officiating side of the sport is misconception and misunderstanding. Off the top of your head, can you tell me the criteria for judging MMA?
Not a clue.
You were the man in the middle when Max pointed to the mat.
The last second of the last round of a 5-round fight ended in a KO. What the
Welcome to Uncaged from talkSPORT. I'm Adam Cattrall. Pleasure as always to be in your company. And as always, the co-pilot of the show is ready to rock and roll. The one and only Mr. Brendan Loughnane. How are you, mate? You good?
Yeah, mate. Good to have a few travellers on the show today, eh?
Well,
few people that knock about the world like myself.
This could be quite an abusive programme because not only do you give me banter on a week-by-week basis, this man specialises in terrorising me wherever I go. Before I introduce him, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We're obviously trying to grow MMA content here at talkSPORT. We're across everything, loads of stuff coming up, including Francis Ngannou's return to the smart cage for PFL. That's coming up very, very shortly. We're going to get you closer to that. And of course, that big showdown between Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway taking place in Abu Dhabi for the UFC. That's coming up at the end of the month. So we're going to get you closer to all of those events. So make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on any of our content. Now then, I'm just going to kick back now because I reckon I'm going to take a couple of 10-8s, maybe even a 10-7 at certain points throughout the course of this conversation because the best referee in the game is joining us on the show. I don't know where he is in the world. He travels more than Brendan Loughnane. It is the one, the only, Mr. Marc Goddard. How are you, buddy? You good?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How you doing?
I'm very well indeed. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on. Pick your brains from the officiating side of this sport. But let's get the elephant out of the room, right? Because on last week's show, me and Brendan were talking about officiating, judging, refereeing, all this type of stuff off the back of the Sphere show. And I said,
I didn't see that, but sorry to interrupt. I didn't see, was it a constructive conversation?
Well, it's me, so what do you reckon?
I'll reserve judgment, go on.
So in the aftermath of that, I said, listen, Mr. Goddard has invited me very kindly to put my money where my mouth is, to go through the intensive Marc Goddard officiating course, judging and refereeing. And I said, listen, I'm up for it. Let's do it. Let's get this thing on. Me and you have had a couple of conversations back and forth about it. I've agreed to do it. However, look at his face now. He knows what's coming. However, there's a clash of dates, Mark. There's a clash of dates.
You agreed to do it, and then you fell at the first hurdle. You fell at the first hurdle. Let's be honest. But look, mate, I know, listen, you got to feed your family and work calls, so I'll let it slide for now.
Brad, has he ever officiated one of your fights?
Yeah, he has. Remember one that we've talked about a few times, Mark, Duke and Moi in Dublin?
Yes, very close fight.
My first world title. I don't know if you've done any more. Can't recall, have you, Mark?
I'm not, you know what, mate, without sounding I'm not sure. But that's
No,
a good thing if I can't remember. But I've certainly refereed Brendan in the past, for sure. Yeah, and I do remember that fight. It was a fantastic fight. But from memory, a close fight. But I think from my memory, I think you won the fight.
Me too, Mark, and we've been over this a few times. I remember you coming into my changing room after and saying, listen, lad, you won that fight. Keep your head up, because I was down. As you can imagine, it's your first world title. You put everything into it. You know, you think you get it, but you don't get it. But do you know what, Mark? It's evened itself out over the years. I've had a few splits go my way. So it's one of them things, isn't it, with the splits? It's, in my opinion, it's just an opinion, isn't it? Like, because you've got three people, and splits really are, one thinks you win, one thinks you don't. So it's a strange one.
Well, no, in a split, two think you win or two think you don't.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know the sentiment. It's a look, and I mean that was some years ago, right? When was that? Scare me.
Nah, Mark, we're going to show our age here, but it could have been about 13 years ago.
Jesus Christ, 13 years ago. Listen, don't talk to me about age. Don't talk to me about age. And here's the thing. How old are you, Brendan?
34.
Oh, son. Oh, sin, honestly. How old are you, Adam?
43. Go on. Tell everybody how old you are. You just had your birthday, ain't you, sweetheart?
No, stop. 43. Yeah. 1943, mate. Yes, I'm 50, Brendan. So I'm 50 years old. So, yeah, But I know you've been around the game for a long time, mate. I remember you for a long time, and obviously your fights, and was fortunate enough to ref you on your ascendancy as well. But I do remember that fight. And yeah, I think even now, looking back, and I know it was a close fight, and I don't know what's happened to that kid because I rated him too. He was
Me
world
too.
class. He
Me
was world
too.
class as well. He was
He
very
went to
good.
the
I don't know what.
UFC, did
Yeah.
well, and then I heard he just ran like I don't want to sound mad, but he actually did here. He joined the ballet or something in France and just went all artsy. So,
Well, you
some
know
kind
what, mate? If he's making a good living out of it, then good luck to him.
fair play to him, mate. You know what I mean? He thought I'm not getting punched in the head anymore. I've done enough of this. I'm off. And then here's
Yeah.
me, Brendan Loughnane, 14 years later, still running around winning world titles.
You're doing all right, mate. You're doing
We
all
are,
right.
Mark.
Listen, Mark, people that consume our show, they'll know your story and how you got involved in officiating and obviously what you're doing right now. What are your biggest frustrations in modern MMA when it comes to officiating?
Media. That's my biggest frustration.
I'll tell you, mate. I cross them in for him and he just smashes them home. Right, go
Mate,
on.
you've just, come on, mate. You're saying it's like a game of headers and volleys, isn't it? Go on. Nah, look, mate. Look, realistically, mate. Look, like you said. Whenever we get together, it's better when Nick's there because I can really start windmilling then. But yeah, look, when you say frustration is not the right word because look, you got to be realistic. We've had a lot of conversations, light-hearted, serious, whatever, and obviously the premise of today's talk, if we're talking about regulation, yeah, it is a frustration, more or less, because it can be because it's still one of the things that dog the sport. But like I explained on the seminar, you have to take my word for it. Like I explain on the seminars, I explain to people that in reality, look, we're still a young sport. For want of a better description, we're 31 years old. Okay, it's known by three letters. You know, the UFC. Yes, we have derivatives in other parts of the world that go on, and Shuto in Japan, and Pancrase and Vale Tudo. But for want of a better description, the sport was still a lot of the people, the originators of the sport, are still involved. That shows its age and how young it still is in its infancy. When you look at our closest relative in a combat perspective, boxing, you've got over 100 years of history ahead of us. So, you know, I think from the officiating side, we're a lot better now. We've crossed a huge curve. I think we've got over a big hill. But like anything, you know, it's a continual thing. And like you said, just harking back to that word frustration, I can always be a little bit frustrated because the biggest thing that dogs the officiating side of the sport is misconception and misunderstanding. That's one of the preeminent things that get me more than frustrated a little bit of the time.
No, and I think, listen, we can have that open conversation with our audience because that's kind of where I was falling down when me and you started having these conversations a few years back. Because you've just mentioned boxing. My first love when it comes to combat sports was boxing. That's kind of what I've grown up watching. And boxing's the Wild West, especially when it comes to the officiating. There is no set unified rules. Yes, okay, you've got the WBA and they'll have their guide as how to score a fight. The WBC have a completely different guide of how they go about doing it, whereas MMA has the unified rules of which you can work towards. And I personally think that they're extremely simple to follow. Of course, there's interpretation of some of the things along the way, but I think they're quite simple to follow. But at the time, one of your frustrations with me was that I was commenting on MMA fights, but coming at it from a boxing mindset, of which then, with the audience that I have, can kind of misconstrue what should be their understanding. I have a responsibility in order to relay the real truth and to try and give some context to the decisions that are being made inside the octagon and the decisions that are being made by the officials when they're scoring a fight.
Yeah, and the proverbial first time I got a hold of you in Abu Dhabi, if you remember, we were sat down and it was great, you know, because like you said, look, yeah, when it comes, and you mentioned boxing, and, you know, and I will say this, look, and it's still not like, you know, MMA, like as a whole at the top, I believe we are in a far better place than boxing. I really do. you know, obviously as an official and a traveling and somebody who's traveling the world doing my job, I don't want to come on here and pour scorn, you know, because I don't like it when it happens. But when I see some of the occurrences and instances in boxing at the top, so sometimes I'm left dumbfounded. You know, I really am, because again, you've got like, when it comes to boxing, there's a lot of the things, and this is where I think MMA is one step ahead, because what you'll have with the officials, not all of them, but a lot of them, you'll have a lot of officials in MMA will come from some form of standing within, whether it be a practitioner or a former competitor, wherever it may be. But there's certainly, I think there's a greater and a deeper level of understanding at the top from the officials of the sport than there is in boxing. And understand, look, there is some absolute world-class boxing officials, and I mean absolute standout world-class. But I think there is also a huge gulf between the world-class people and the people underneath. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in MMA, but I don't think it's as jaw-dropping, if that makes sense.
Here's one for you, Brent. Here's one for you, right? Because one thing that I find as a person that interviews fighters, and obviously there's many conversations with Mr. Goddard, I find it quite striking how many fighters don't fully understand the unified rules, especially when it comes to the way that you score a fight.
It's true.
Have you ever had a sit down? Have you ever had a conversation about how a fight is scored? Because at the end of the day, this is your game.
You got me there. Sorry to Brendan. Sorry, pal. I do not. Sorry, man. I'm not jumping in here. I was thinking about this morning. So I was just saying, look, Brendan, I've known you for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
I've watched you fight from when you was a young kid and you come on. Yeah. How long have you been fighting? 17
years.
Okay. How many fights you had?
48. Okay. 49.
You're a bona fide world champion in a major promotion. Sat there now, and I can tell if you've looked at Google before we spoke.
No, I haven't.
Okay, sat there now.
Let's
Brendan,
go.
Off the top of your head, can you tell me the criteria for judging MMA right off the top of your head?
Not a clue. No, I'm being serious. I know.
Thank you for that. And there you go. Therein lies. Can you tell me another sport?
Yeah.
That at the very top of where you are, you're at the top of the sport.
Yeah.
Can you tell me another sport where the players, participants, or other people don't have at least a base level? Look, let me be honest. Look, it's not the fans. It's the official's job to know verbatim, back to front, black and white, what the rule book is.
Yeah.
But in general, like, mate, you're sat there now. You're a PFL world champion, okay? Yeah. About to potentially be a second-time world champion.
Of course,
fought around the world, highest level of competition, Yeah. But even you as a fighter, you may be, I don't know, I'm not putting words into your mouth, you're not clear, or you might be confused on what you think is the criteria.
Mark, I'm less than not clear. Honestly. Like, I'm less than not clear. That would be an understatement.
At least you're honest, buddy.
No, I am. No, listen, this is why I'm glad you've come on today, because I've got some questions for you that's actually going to help me in the future, right? As a fighter, and I'm sure a lot of fighters do watch this. So my first big question, me and Adam got into a debate about this last week, and I would like to clear this up with you. Can you define a 10-8 round for us, please? Get this out of the way first of all, please.
I can help define a 10-8 round. What you're looking for is the substantiated difference between what could potentially be, and this is where a lot of discussion goes on, because there's as a judge, we have two tools, okay? That's the first thing to get out there. A judge has two tools, and what you'll have is, going back to the people like Adam and other media personalities used to always throw down, oh, it's from boxing, it's this, it's that, and MMA score, it's not from boxing, okay? What was borrowed from boxing was the scoring system, the 10-point must, okay?
Yes.
That's the thing that we share in commonality.
Yeah.
Boxing has its own criteria, okay? MMA has its own defined set of criteria, which I think is far more detailed, greater understood than boxing. But what you got to understand is when a judge sits down in that chair to judge a round of fighting, in their mind, it's not the secondary action. The 10-point must system is just sat there waiting to be told what to do at the end of a round. That doesn't determine what the judge is seeing in the round. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course, of course.
The judge is sat there, or the judge should be sat there with a clear, understood, and competent distinction of what the
Yes.
criteria of MMA scoring should be. Okay, so coming back, that's the first thing. Coming back to the 10-8, what we're looking for is some form of overwhelming dominance. Okay, something that can clearly distinguish that of which could be a quite wide margin 10-9 or a 10-9 could be the closest round on record. It could be a one punch difference.
True.
That's where a good judge is going to sit there.
True.
A judge, by definition, mate, what they're going to do, they're going to have the knowledge and the balls to put a pen to paper. Okay, we don't have 10-10 rounds in MMA. That's just not a thing. Okay, for incomplete rounds or technical decisions, maybe. So you could have quite a wide margin in a 10-9 because of the current way the scoring system is. Then you could have something that starts to overlap. And if you remember a number of years ago, there was some additional training aids that came out to help judging in the criteria. And what it was, there was 3Ds. And you're looking for the 3Ds with domination, damage, duration. Okay? And what they're saying is here, if a competent, well-versed judge is sat in a chair and he can wholeheartedly and vehemently put on paper, I believe that the fighter was dominated, damaging, which is the number one criteria first and foremost, and could have been for the duration. And that doesn't mean bell to bell. It doesn't mean 5 minutes is a long time, mate, as you know. When you're out there fighting, it seems like forever. The domination, the duration factor doesn't have to be bell to bell. It can be separate pockets of time in a round that add up. So what you're looking for, and generally, look, it's like this. When I say to people, sometimes when you see a fighter gets his ass kicked in a 10-8 round, okay, he gets his ass kicked. I've always said to judges, a 10-8 should write itself. But of course, you have to go through the education, the process. Don't get confused with what the criteria is, and then those additional training aids of, look, you could have a round of fighting that has dominance positionally. It could certainly have duration in terms of could be more than 50% of that round, but there's zero damage. Mm-hmm. What does that look like in consideration to another round?
I've got a question. You touched on something there, and I didn't know this. You've just educated me again. As a person that's on nearly 50 fights in this sport, you're still educating me with stuff. Now, one that you touched on there is damage. I want to pick your brain on damage, right? So let's say I've been out grappled, I've been out wrestled, but I land a great shot at the end of the round on his eyes like that.
Uh-huh.
What happens then? Because I've got more damage technically, but he's out grappled me for most of the round.
Okay, but that grappling, okay, what a judge does is he looks at a picture. Okay, remind me to come back to this. Remind me to come back to Adesanya Whittaker round 1. Just remind that. Adam, you keep the notes, son. I'll keep talking to Brendan.
Yeah.
Keep that note, okay? So, Brendan, so what I'm saying is what I'm doing, my job as a judge is to judge effectively. That grappling that you said, what did it look like? Yeah. Was it impactful takedowns or was it simple trips? Was it positional dominance or was it locked in submissions? There's effectiveness attributed to every single action, and judging is MMA is an offensive-based sport, okay? Right. Credit, score, points are always given to offense. Did you know, Brendan, because I know you're a truthful kid, did you know that defense was never scored or come into a judge's mind? Did you know that?
Really? So if you're defending every takedown?
Buddy, there you go. The word defense, they were saying, Adam, you know what? Don't go home, mate.
I love it.
Because this is perfect. You're a great example, okay? Because like I said, world champion, bona fide world level, world-class fight, etc., at the top of the sport, and you don't know these things, okay? Now, that's not necessarily your fault. What that does is goes to illustrate and further show the gulf and the thing. When everybody like Adam and Nick and all they see me, and I'm always berating people, etc., but that's because it's just my job. I'm a custodian of this sport, and I want everybody. And I want everybody to do well. Now, I'll come back to you said about you're talking about damage.
Yeah.
This is one of the best examples for you. So if you go to Israel Adesanya and Rob Whittaker, the first fight they had, I was the ref. It was still the UFC's attendance. It was in Melbourne at the Marvel Arena, the stadium show. Round one. Not too much happening, but there's a quite clear margin, okay? Rob Whittaker's edging ahead, scoring effectively, quite clearly, not by any wide margin, but it's a very understandable, very clear, very easy 10-9 round to Rob Whittaker until
the bell, right on.
There's 9 seconds to go. You hear the clappers go. They're coming in, etc., etc. Whittaker, and then Israel comes in. Bang. So right hook drops Whittaker straight on the spot. At that point, a judge, a well-versed, educated judge will know that that single one shot outdoes everything that was done for the other 4 minutes, 52 seconds prior to that. That is as good an example of a one-shot assessment of damage that you're ever likely to get. And we have this needle that goes like this, swinging towards one fighter. One single decisive shot, even like as I said, it wasn't Rob Whittaker wasn't streets ahead, but he was comfortably ahead. Neither fighter was damaged up until that point. All judges were there, ready to go pen to paper, ready to go 10-9 Rob Whittaker. And I urge yourself and Adam, even after this conversation, I urge every single listener to go and have a look, because that will define exactly what damage means to win a round. It's a perfect example. It's a textbook example of how you can go 4 minutes, 52 seconds to one red corner or blue corner. One single shot turns the tide and it swings it back in that favor. That's a clear illustration of awarded damage.
Who had the most effect? I'd say another thing that winds him up, and it winds me up now that me and him have had many conversations about this.
Yeah.
When in commentary, somebody makes that reference to the takedown won the round. Winds me the hell up. Now, previously, without the education, I didn't know. But now, when I hear it, I'm like going, please stop saying that. Because, Mark, please explain. The takedown is just a change of position. It's what you do with it, isn't it?
Correct. I mean, people don't understand that. Obviously, it was like, even back in the day, because it's not 2002. People think that if you finish the round on top, or you take someone down, that you've won the round. It's like, it's so absurd, And obviously, Brendan, look, I'm sure you are aware, look, not all takedowns are the same, obviously, as not all punches and not all kicks are the same. So if I take you down, okay, if I just run into you and bundle you to the ground and I land in a closed guard or a half guard, yes, it's an offensive action. Yes, it can be given some credit, but it bears absolutely no significance as to somebody having, like I said, comes back to the effectiveness, the damage, and impactful. If I clinch with you and I hip toss you or CNAG you or suplex you over my head and slam you or bang you into that mat with impact, again, that could outdo 12 or fucking 13 outside bundles or trips that you had before me. Do you understand what I'm saying? When we fight, make no mistake about it, the number one criteria, the preeminent factor that a judge will consider is damage. That's what it is. It used to be the word impact. They never liked the word damage. But let's be honest, you're in a fight, and my job is to damage you within the realms of the rules, to render you potentially not able to continue in that fight anymore. Damage is always the preeminent factor to consider for a judge.
Well, I'm going to pull you up on that one again, because I've always been under the assumption, and I've actually infamously lost the UFC contract because of this. I think everyone's quite aware, because it was a close round, and I was hearing from my corner, get the takedown to secure the round. So even fighters at this level, like this was what we're going back 6 years ago. I don't know if it's changed slightly now with rules or whatever, but the mindset always was, it's a close round, get a takedown. I mean, I personally, I'm glad hearing this from you now that that's changed, because I am not a takedown guy, and I never have been, but I always thought to myself, it's a close round, let's try and edge it with a takedown. So I'm actually been on the side that you're saying, of thinking that. So it's good that you're actually clearing this up for me.
Brendan, it may do. You could, like I said, that takedown, like I said, even though Nothing's happened to it from him. If I take you down, here's another thing to consider. Like I said, if I take you down with impact, that's the top of the scale. If I throw you, suplex you, bounce you on your back, whatever it may be, with hard visible impact, that's the top of the scale. If I'm landing in a dominant position on top of that, so if I'm not in a closed guard or a half guard, if I'm in side control or full mount or take your back off that takedown, that's also preeminently rewarded more. Okay? What you're saying there is, and it's not without the realms of possibility, that you have a really, really, really super close round, ultra competitive, and then that offensive action. Because, like I said, bundling someone to the mat or taking them down, whilst it may not be highly impactful, could be enough. It could be a determining factor because it was a successfully offensive maneuver. It could still be enough to give you that. But what I'm saying is this: a judge is looking at the other 4 minutes, 58 seconds of what happened around, and you'll still get the ridiculous side. I could absolutely piece you up in a fight, and then you take me down with a minute to go and hold me down. Who's won the round? I have. In the same way as I can win a round off my back with you in a closed guard. I can pull your head down, break your posture, hit you with elbows, punches. I can win a round off my back very clearly.
That's, you know what? I'm so glad, because all these instances, because I've had that many now, everything you've said has happened to me. One of the when I fought Mov Lead in the semi-final 3 years ago, a judge, I spent a lot of it on my back, and one of them gave me the fight because I was on the back. I was trying to cause action, and I spoke to the judge after. He said, "Yeah, what? He sat there with his head on your chest, like that's why I give it you." So
Catch leather.
yeah, I feel like, we're seeing it in the UFC a lot now as well. Guys are getting 12 takedowns and still losing fights, but they're getting them, and the guy's getting up immediately. So I feel like it's much fairer now, the judging.
Here's the thing, mate. It's not there. It's just more understood. It was always there. It's just more understood. And like you said, you got back up. So what? That's your job. You get zero credit, none, for getting back to your feet. Nothing. All the credit goes to the person, the offensive guy. You had to get back to your feet if you don't want to lose. Or you could elect to stay there, pull them down, and start beating them up. Now you're the aggressor. Now you're the offensive person. Nothing gets, and like if I'm throwing punches at you and you're slipping, bobbing, you're putting on a masterclass of movement and it looks beautiful. You're scoring this much points. Nothing, zero.
Wow.
That's your
Interesting.
job, because if you don't slip, bob, weave, and move and look fantastic, I'm going to start piecing you up. And even though I could be the sloppiest striker in the world, if I'm connecting with you, I'm winning the round. You moving around and looking fantastic technically is nothing. That's your job. Your sole reward of not being hit is your job. If I'm connecting with you in any shape or form, standing, clinch, or on the ground, I'm the one that's edging ahead. And it's mad, mate. Like I said, look at I'm fucking excited. Look at Catterall look at Catterall taking a grinning back seat. You ain't off the hook, mate. You're getting dragged back into this by your feet in a minute. Trust me. But when I'm talking to, like I said, Brendan, well, I couldn't be talking to a better example, because we're not talking to we're talking to a current active fighter who was a world champion, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
on the cusp of a second world championship fights, and you're
Yeah.
telling me you're finding things out for the first time. That's crazy.
Like, honestly, Mark, some of the stuff you're telling me here is news to my ears at this stage, which is, you know what, it's quite alarming, really, isn't it? And I think there has to be a lot more. Fighters need to be sat down, mate, honestly, because if someone like me who's had as many fights as I have and at the level that I'm at are still asking questions, it's concerning,
It
isn't
is,
it?
mate.
So PFL, Bellator, all the top end sport, like obviously in grassroots it's a lot more difficult, but at the top end you need to be sat down, mate. Like in these rules meetings, why are we not being told this? We're just being told go after it and you'll get a bonus. You're not being told what the actual criteria. No, I've never been sat down with a criteria. How about that?
Okay, Brendan, but here I'm going to say, whose fault's that?
Is it
It's
mine? Is it?
absolutely yours.
Is it?
It's 100% yours, son. I'm telling you that.
Is
Yes,
it?
yes, because a
your
rules meet.
job.
Here's another thing when it comes to a rules meet.
So where do I go for it?
Come to
It's
me,
online,
son.
mate. This
Come
is
to
this
me.
is a this is a pub. Come to my course. Download it. Come to
Come do
my
the course
course.
with me.
Master
Download.
salesman here.
Brendan, listen. After this conversation, okay, you can go on to my goddardmma.com plug. You can download. I do an online version. You will never look at the sport the same again. So what I'm expecting, young man, in the is to see your name come up when I get a notification and there's another purchase. I want to see B-Lock name. It's your, because it is, look, when it comes to how far do you go? You know yourself, mate, when you're in the locker room, right? And referees come to talk to you before the fight. Really, it's I know from experience, having been there, you got to, but I've got a couple of minutes of your attention, if that. You're preparing for a world championship fight. You're preparing for the
Yeah.
fight of your life. I'm not going to sit there
Yeah.
and lecture you. I'm going to give you the brief ins and outs or the common mistakes from a rules perspective. What I can't do there is start going in, going, so, Brendan, what do you understand about the judging? Let's talk about the criteria. This is the
Yeah.
unified rules of MMA. It's not the Deep Sea Scrolls or the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's a publicly accessible document, and you guys, coaches, like I said, but there's another thing I'm going to press upon here. There's a big, and this is another thing that hurts us, is like, Billy Bash 124 on Twitter goes, I've read the unified rules. Well, you may well have done, son. And there's a big difference between reading something and understanding something. I go to school, I may read. That's why we have teachers. Teachers' job is to tell you something you don't know and explain it to you in a way that you will understand and
Yeah.
get it. So I can
Yeah.
download this information and I can look at it, but do I understand it? No. That's where the teaching comes in. But to put a short shrift on it, it absolutely is. There is a responsibility there for corners and coaches to do a bit of a deep dive. This is your life, mate. This is how this is how you make your living. It's how you made your living for a long time.
Yeah.
There is access and there is ways and means of understanding what you should be doing and what judges when you're inside the cage and the three judges are outside. Look, here's another. Take the note. You know what the rules are, don't you, Brendan? You,
Yeah, of
there
course.
you go. So you know what you should and should do. You know, if I'm reffing you and you headbutt someone, you know there's going to be a problem. You know, if someone's lying
Yeah.
on your back, you can't stamp them in the face. So all those things as a fighter, you know the rules. But on the other side of that, it's just taking one step further. Take a couple of hours out and read the.
It's
Mate,
true. It's true, mate. And you've educated me on that. And I will be downloading that and I will be looking through it, because even some of the things you just told me now, like I thought the takedown, I still thought the takedown was a do all and end all. I'm living in the
It
Stone
may
Age.
be. It could look in the closest round. It could be. And like I said, all takedowns aren't equal. If you run through somebody, double leg, pick them up, slam them on their back with high impact, and you score, and then you land in side control in a close round. Fuck, clearly that's enough to win the round. But you
Yeah,
could,
yeah,
like I
yeah.
said, what
I'm with you.
people get caught up on isolated points. Okay, it's not an isolated point. A round is 5 minutes long. A judge's
It's
job
true.
is to sit there and give you basically he's giving you a synopsis, a takeaway, a verdict. That's what judging by definition. What do we do in a court of law? Judges sit there for a verdict, singular, unanimous, wherever it is. Their verdict should come from a reasoned, educated, considered opinion on what they value in the round, based upon the current criteria of MMA, which is widely and readily available.
But Adam, please, one
go on,
more.
carry on, mate. It's great because people listen. You
Mark.
know that our audience are listening to this, going, "I didn't even know that." So
Yeah.
keep going, man. Keep going.
Yeah, of course. Why do we see then, Mark, such incompetent 30-27s each way? One guy will give a 30-27 one
Yeah.
way, and one guy will give a 30-27 the other way. And it's thinking, wait, how can you both see something so different under these rules and under these parameters that you've been given? How do you see it so different?
Look, you're absolutely right. And of course, when these things happen, and like I said, even worse or even more so if they happen at the highest level, obviously I'm a professional, right? I'm not going to sit here and start lambasting other officials or
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
myself in a position. I'm not saying it hasn't happened or it couldn't happen, but in general, yes, when that happens, I mean, you've had a 30-27 or 27-30 the other way, of course it doesn't look good. Sometimes when you get split decisions as well, like I said, not even as dramatic, a split decision, which means, two judges have agreed, one judge hasn't. But that's one judge on one. I'll tell you something in that, another thing. Probably the most controversial fight in MMA history, or one of certainly the most controversial fight in MMA history, was George St. Pierre versus Johnny Hendricks.
Johnny
Yeah, and
Hendricks,
I use, when I do my training seminars for judges, I use that fight for explicit purposes because it's still a great example, and people don't understand because obviously there was a lot of influence. There was a lot of influence during the fight, and there was a lot of influence after the fight. But if you isolate that fight, okay, and I know that fight punch for verbatim because I've done it so many times. You have a world championship fight. It's 5 rounds. You have 3 judges, okay? That's a total of 15 possible scores. In the first round, one judge, just one, went to Johnny's way. 2, 3, 4, and 5, all the judges were unanimous in their scoring, exactly the same. 14 out of 15 possible scores were identical. It was one judge, Nelson Hamilton, who, and if you look at the fight, and it's perfectly understandable why he scored it that way, because if you look at the fight and you'll see there's a certain point in the first round when Johnny's against the cage, he's defending a double leg. George is in on a double with him, and he throws a series of elbows. And you know yourself, being elbowed in the head, it's not a nice experience. And depending on the density of what's between your ears, they can make a hollow sound or a dull sound. But you look, it was a series of elbows. He was physically marked up by them. And if you look, go back and watch that fight. And as you see those elbows come in, who's the judge that sat right underneath where they're happening? Nelson Doc Hamilton. And he saw something which was used in his, and it was you. It was a close round, but at that point, it was enough to swing him from his. Don't forget, judges are sat in 3 vantage points. They see different things. We hear different things. Brendan, you're in an arena, and your octagon is, or your cage is 30-foot diameter. You dip, and you dig one into the liver. Okay. The judge right next, you can hear your opponent go with a body shot. The 2 judges behind you can't hear that. They may not have seen that, but the judge that was sat closest could have heard it, could have saw it. There's so many factors that come into play when you're looking at MMA, not just on the highest level. This is regardless of level. There's so many factors: line of sight, your view, how you hear things, how you see things, etc. But that example of, and again, I'll urge the viewers to go and watch. Again, it was probably still is the most controversial fight, but controversial why? Because it's caused a misunderstanding. And then you'll see there's a very famous picture afterwards. If you go to the post-fight press conference, and you'll see a picture. Johnny GSP looks like he's been attacked by a pack of dogs, because he's got that skin that if you look at him, he'll flare up. And then you look at Johnny Hendricks, he looks like he's just got out of bed. Not a scratch on him. But this is post-fight. This has no, obviously if you're cut or you're swollen during the fight, the judges can see it. There's all these factors, mate, and it's so, like I said, when the public jump on something because of it's something they heard, and obviously all their misunderstanding on top of that, it just snowballs and exasperates it, and it's mind-blowing, mate. It's crazy sometimes.
That's all it is.
Because you know what, Mark? It literally, we're talking about 1 month ago, it just happened to me. We've got one judge giving all 3 rounds to me, and then you've got another judge giving Kai 2 out of the 3 rounds. And I'm just like, we're putting our lives in your life, we're putting our livelihood, we're putting $1 million, we're putting everything into these 3 people. So you'd expect some kind of middle ground here. Like, how can all 3 give it me and then 2 give 2 rounds to him? 1 give 2 rounds to him. It from a fighter's perspective, and again, we'll go all the way back to Dukamar. That ruined my life. I was going to the UFC after that. I'd spent 9-10 months of my life training for that, and we're quite in agreement that I won the fight, and so was 90% of the world, so was everyone that watched it. And as a fighter, it set me back 5 years, like these kind of decisions, and it's really difficult from our point of view. And sometimes, mate, it just feels like I'm flipping a coin. It's just like flipping a coin after the fight, and it's hard for us as fighters. But I don't do myself any favours by not knowing the criteria, like we've just established. But Mark, I just wanted to get that across to you because it's just so all over the place with a lot of these judges, and it's hard from our perspective
but
too.
What you've got to understand as well is that, as Mark said, sport's really young still. there are certain commissions around the world that are better than other commissions around the world. People are still being educated and getting up to speed, aren't they?
Yes, it's a continual process. Like, I didn't see your last fight, Brendan. And obviously, I knew
Yeah,
the
yeah.
result, but I didn't see your last fight. But like you said, the rounds in question were the close rounds.
Yeah, they were
There you
close.
go. There you go.
I'm not
And
gonna
that's
lie.
why. And people see the look. When you hear, there's a lot of misconceptions in MMA, and judges get a lot of fire, and referees we get more, but judges get a lot
Yeah,
of
you
fire
do.
than MMA. And like you said, what does a split decision mean? Okay, a split decision means it's a close fight. Okay, you'll
Yeah.
have people that go split decision. What's the word they attribute straight away? Robbery.
Mm.
You
He loves
idiot.
that.
You moron. You idiot. Did you see the fight? No. Shut up then. Your opinion's worthless. Are you a trained judge? No. So your opinion's even more worthless. And I'm not being condescending when I say that, because look, you're never
There's
gonna
also
get away from the
there's
hang on,
also
Adam.
there's
Hang on,
also
Adam.
another point to
Hang
take
on,
in.
Adam. Hang
Just
on.
let me just throw this in because there's another point to take in on what you're
Go
saying.
on.
A lot of fans bet on fights, so by losing money, that's automatically throws them up to another level.
Of
They just want to
course,
argue for
son.
the sake of
Of
arguing.
perfect, mate. You're perfect. Even though you threw me off what I was gonna say there. You know. Listen, yeah, when it comes to me, like I've had it before, like obviously, like you said, fighters, look, fans betting on fights. Nobody gives a about your $30 parlay, mate. No one.
Yeah,
Not me.
I know,
Not
it's true.
me. Not the judges. Not the fighters. No one. So you can call me what you want on Twitter because you've lost your $30 or $40. I don't care. You know, I don't go. I don't go to the court of public opinion. Twitter and Instagram doesn't define me. It doesn't assign me. It doesn't pay my bills. It doesn't promote me professionally. It doesn't promote fighters professionally. You can't get away from that. We've got to be realistic. I said that court of public opinion and that you can't get away from that. People are going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if they've lost money, could be a small sum of money, could be a substantial sum of money, they're going to be, they're going to be in another mind. I mean, they're already in a different mind space anyway, but they're going to be in a different mind space. Plus, they don't even understand what they're talking about. So they're even further down in the mud, in the dark. You can't trust me from me, mate. As a fighter, Brendan, you'll get online. And the same as an official when you're dealing with high profile fights and you're making decisions that people, it's not about not agreeing with me. I'm fine with that. You'll never understand. You'll never understand. And if you tried to, sometimes you think, and it took me a long time, mate, you'll literally go round the bend. You just have to.
Well, listen, Mark, I've got one more to throw in here now, and this is another important one. I'm going to give it you from a fighter's perspective, yeah? Every time I fight, which is a lot, 4 times every 6-7 months, yeah, I take a deep breath as I walk into the changing room and I find out who my ref is. Because I know there's good ones and I know there's bad ones. I'm not going to point out who's good and who's bad, but it's well known within the fighters' circle who's good and who's bad. I swear, me, I go in and I look at the sheet and I go, who's my ref, right? And if I see a name that I don't like, mate, it scares the living daylights out of me immediately. I'm not just saying it because you're on the show and I'm a lick ass. If I got a Marc Goddard, I'm over the moon, yeah? There is 3 good ones, I think. 3 good ones, yeah? Outside of that, mate, it's nerve-wracking for the fighters. And some of the names that I'm not going to throw about, mate, I've seen it on the paper and I've gone like that to my corner. Fucking hell, he's on the job today. And that's another thing that needs to be cleared up from our point of view as well, because some of them, you get good and bad in every profession, right? But essentially, without taking it too drastic, our lives are in your hands. And when I see a bad name on my sheet, mate, it's scary, Mark.
I understand that sentiment. Look, obviously, as a fighter, even when I was fighting there, of course, you want an element of trust. That's what it is.
Yeah.
There's an element of trust there, and obviously, but here's the thing. Like I said, look, because I've had instances where I've refereed fights, fighters have lost, but they haven't lost because of me. They've lost because of their own decisions. But unfortunately, sometimes, I'm not saying you're one of them. We've never been in that position. Sometimes fighters, corners, coaches they're looking for something to attach or attribute.
Yeah.
And a lot of times,
Yeah.
unfairly so.
That's true.
Unfairly so.
That's true.
And they'll look for a reason as to why you lost that fight. Now, it could have been, look, I'm a human being. I could have zigged when I should have zagged. I could have made a choice that I shouldn't have done, etc., etc. But there's so many instances, Brendan. There's so many instances where, and I get totally what you're saying, because obviously, again, even a fighter, is a fighter at the start of his career any less important than a fighter fighting for a world title? No, they're not, because to him, that is his world title. If he's getting his first shot in Bellator, PFL, UFC, to him that is his world title. He's beginning. He's just opened that door. And I've always said, as a referee, here's the thing: do we referee all fights the same? No, of course we don't. Do we approach all fights the same? No, of course you don't. What you will get, regardless of the level I'm reffing, whether it be an amateur on Cage Warriors or a world championship fight at Vegas, New York, Brazil, it could be anywhere, you'll always get the same me. I'm always going to be the same version of me. Obviously, how you approach fights is going to be different. I'm not going to let a first-time amateur or a first-time pro get into as deeper water as somebody in a main event fighting for a world championship. It's common sense. Common sense is going to denote that, despite what Billy Bash 124 on Twitter thinks, because of course he's got 20 years reffing experience just like I have, hasn't he? You know, and they're going to know different. But look, mate, it's one of those things. You can't change the world. And look, this sport, like any, I said it's not job dependent, it's not job specific. In any job you have, you want two things. I always say, and I say it when I teach the officials, that there's two markers, two building blocks. Okay, one is competency. Do you understand what you're doing? And the second is common sense, which is the ability to apply number one when it matters most. That's the building blocks for all fucking walks of life in any role that you do. Do you know what you're doing? And can you do it when you should do it? That's it. And of course, in our game, it's combat sport. It's the highest of emotions, sometimes for millions and millions of dollars. We're trying to do that, honestly, from if I'm there and the guys I know at the world class levels and other refs and judges, I don't just referee from here, it's from the heart too. You know, I'm a human being. I'm not beyond reproach. I'm not beyond, explaining or sitting down. Hopefully, I'm trying to do a job here, explaining and putting things out. But I can tell you that we are a rare breed, and we're trying to. I'm in there with you, and you and your opponent. I'm in there with you. My job is just to guide you through, not get in the way, not interfere. I don't want to say anything when a fight starts, but I don't decide that. You and your opponent do. My job, my utopia, and I've had it. I've had fight of the years all the time for so many years. If I can stand back and watch 25 minutes of world class action unfold in front of me, and all I say, start and stop, happy days.
Best seat in the
Beautiful.
house. Best seat in the house, apart from obviously the people that are doing their thing. And with that in mind, then, you've had fight of the years. What are your top three? You've been doing it a long time, man. What are your top three? What are the ones that you go, wow, I was there for that?
Well, I never used to be able to answer it, but it's weird because for nearly 20 years, you think, I can't have too many fights, but I can answer it. I can decisively answer it. So
Nice.
I would say Jiri Prohaska. I'll go from 3 to 1. Build a bit of suspense.
Nice.
Okay?
Let's go.
So I'll say Jiri Prohaska versus Glover in Singapore when he won the belt.
Wow.
Number 2, which is going to go out to a few people, if you'll understand what this meant, how it was at the time. Brendan, you'll remember. Adam, you should remember if you were covering MMA at that time. Was Alex Reed and Tom Watson.
Wow.
What a fight. Wow, you pulled it out the archives.
Now let me
what a fight.
Let me tell you a little bit. I can't wait to get my book out, mate, when I'm finishing. Little bit of trivia around this fight. If you remember Alex Reed, and people don't know him, Alex Reed's
he's an animal.
Alex Reed's been there. He's been there from the same time as me, pre-millennium.
Yeah.
Genuine. He was an ex-serviceman. He was in the Marines. He fought at world title level. Fought Lee Murray. Fought Mark Weir. Fought every. Alex was a dog.
Yeah.
Then he went away and he done his whole thing, and then he got with obviously Katie Price. Yeah. Do you remember this, Adam?
He went on Big Brother, didn't he, and all that type of carry on. He went
Before
on.
that,
Everyone
way
thought
before
Tom was
that.
going to run away with it,
Way
didn't
before
they?
that. So this is the height of his fame with Katie Price. And of course, they were the most photographed couple in Great
Yeah.
Britain. They were like Posh and when Posh and Bex had moved away, they took over. He was at the height of his fame. And obviously when he fought Tom, so people thought, the public thought that Alex Reed was just some guy,
Yeah.
Jordan's boyfriend that's going to have a fight. Obviously he was fighting,
Some cross-dressed
Yeah.
he was fighting Tom Watson, who is another animal, another dog. And then Tom,
Yes.
they had this big story about Tom with Jordan in the papers, and it matched it up perfectly. And Bama were going to do that. Bama were doing the fight. It was when we were on, remember Bravo?
Yes.
And I always said,
Yeah,
mate,
yeah.
here's the thing. I get chills thinking about it. I'm going to put this in the book because this was Britain's Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner moment.
Bonner, yeah.
And Bama, they blew it. They blew it. They had it in their hand. So that fight, when it took place, just before, it was actually a couple of days before, and Bama goes, oh, it's 3 rounds, world title. And I went, no, what are you doing? And they said, oh, it's 3. And I went, no. They said, Alex asked for 3. And I went, no. I said, you can't. I said, you can't do it. It's a world title fight. It's got to be 5 rounds. And there was a big humming up. There was a big hoo-ha. Me and Jeremy Bailey, I've known Jeremy forever. He's a stand-up bloke. I love him. We were having an argument in the back, and I was saying, no, Jeremy, it's got to be 5 rounds. And he's going, no, we'll get another ref. And that, like I said, me and him, mate, we're tight as I love the bloke, mate. He's hilarious. And then then they agreed. So from my intervention, then it went on. And like I said, it went on for 25 minutes. It was a war. Everybody, it went live on Bravo. And then everybody was like, it peaked at over 1 million viewers.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, what's happening? Look at this fight. Look at this fight. And they turned on, and it was 5 rounds of. I remember, mate, I'll tell you this now. In 25 years of MMA, I've only gone into the locker room a handful of times. That was one of the times, you know. That was one of the times I went in. I remember I looked at Alex. He looked up. He just burst it. He couldn't even speak. He had about 4 or 5 fractures in his face. And obviously Tom won the fight decisively. But it was the atmosphere and the pressure around that fight. I was after the fight, but it was honest to God, mate. If you were there at the time, understanding what the scene was like, it was at the NEC in Birmingham.
Yeah.
It was and obviously all the razzmatazz with her being there, the TV cameras. Honest to God, mate, it was one of them great, and the fight lived up to it too, because it was like a cauldron and everything. It was a perfect storm, and it all made up for it at once. And the fact that I felt a little bit proud because I was badgering, going, don't make it 3 rounds. Please make it 5 rounds. We was arguing the day before, that me and Jeremy was arguing the day before in the dressing room. And they finally agreed and made it 5 rounds. And it was 5 rounds of carnage, war. So that's number 2. And then number 1 is every day of the week, twice on a Sunday, is Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum.
Oh.
That's when I found out. You know, I said, but like, you'll know yourself, mate. And I'd fought before, and I didn't fight at UFC level. I wasn't good enough to fight UFC. But my second coming was an official I just didn't know. And there's one moment in your life, and that's why I can retire happy. I've done my thing, obviously with jiu-jitsu and wrestling, other things, but I was happy. You find one moment in your life where you think, you know, I'm not going to go away. In this fight, you had 2 guys in the exact same moment that wouldn't go away. I couldn't believe what I was watching unfold in front of me.
I'm willing to die.
And I remember that. You remember there's a clip at the beginning of the 5th round, and Israel's
Amazing.
looking across to him saying, I'm prepared to die. No, I didn't. I'm not looking at this. I'd seen it afterwards. But honestly, mate, that fight, when you got 2 fighters they went into the deepest, darkest depths of their soul, and they went into the deepest, darkest waters imaginable or possible in a fight. And I was right alongside them, standing 3 foot away, witnessing this unfold. And I remember that. If you go back and you watch that last 10 seconds sequence of the fight, and Rogan's going, stop it. And in my head, I'm going, no, you know, man, because I know. And there could have been a point, because even if 1 second left, But Kelvin Gastelum, when he took it just a little, because Izzy had him on the depths of despair in that final round. That's the deepest, darkest point I've ever seen a fighter go to and allowed to finish that round. And you watch the fight when it finishes, I run off straight away. As soon as I know they're safe, I run off with my head in my hands. And I won't be ashamed to say I've cried after that fight, watching it back, because it was ungodly what those guys did. It was ungodly.
You were the man in the middle when Max pointed to the mat against Justin at UFC 300.
That's a great point, Adam, because here's the thing. Max, absolute savage. Justin, absolute savage. That was a fantastic fight. It was a great fight. But of course, if you were to pick one moment, so if I can be selfish here, there's the top 3 fights.
Yeah.
And or somebody said to me, the best fight you've ever been involved or seen in MMA, Kelvin and Adesanya. Single-handedly, hands down, categorically, the greatest moment I've ever experienced as a ref is that. How can you make that? It's almost like a script. You've got the last second of the last round of a 5-round fight ended in a KO. What the that was like, and remember there, mate, because it came out with the audio, and I was like, wow, because I've never done that in 20 years. And if you go back to all those fights, those fight of the years I've had in all the amazing places, that was just an automatic reaction. He threw that shot. I've seen Justin go down. I always said that before as well. Like, obviously, Max, that's singularly to me one of, if not probably the greatest, one isolated shot in UFC history, because of the way in which it unfolded. And spare a thought for Justin too. Obviously, Max is violent.
Yeah, it was.
But, they both played their part in that fight. And it was a fantastic fight, competitive up to that round. But I think if you're looking at it as a 20, of course, that single one, if you were to isolate a single moment, it's that, unquestionably that. But in terms of a bell-to-bell, round-to-round fight, the 3 that I gave you, especially Kelvin and Izzy, is number 1.
Hey, listen, I could sit here all day doing this, but I'm conscious that everybody's got.
Thank you, Mark.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the education,
show,
and I will be reading it. Please send it me as soon as we get off.
Appreciate it, guys.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app, and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.